The dust swirled across the parched street as Penelope Norwood's hands trembled on the steaming kettle, her gaze fixed on the ominous figures lurking outside the window of her modest home in Tombstone, Arizona. That morning in 1882 had begun like any other in the frontier town, but the serenity shattered when three notorious outlaws from the Hollister Gang rode in, their intentions as dark as their reputation. "Priscilla," Penelope whispered urgently to her younger sister, who sat mending a dress by the hearth. "They're back again. The men Pa warned us about." Priscilla Norwood, barely 19 to Penelope's 22, looked up with wide hazel eyes. Unlike her older sister's practical nature, Priscilla possessed a romantic spirit that had yet to be dimmed by the harsh realities of frontier life. Her auburn hair fell in waves around her heart-shaped face as she moved to join her sister at the window. "The Hollister Gang?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Are you certain?" Penelope nodded, her chestnut hair pulled back in a sensible bun. "I recognize Jacob Hollister from the wanted posters. Those men with him must be his brothers." Outside, three men on horseback circled their modest home like wolves sizing up prey. Their leader, a man with a jagged scar running down his cheek, pointed toward the sisters' home and laughed a sound that carried through the thin walls and sent shivers down Penelope's spine. "They've been asking questions in town," Penelope continued, moving away from the window. "About us, Priscilla. About Pa's claim. Their father, Samuel Norwood, had struck a modest but promising silver vein 6 months earlier in the hills just outside of Tombstone. He traveled to Tucson 3 weeks ago to register his claim properly and purchase additional supplies, leaving his daughters with promises of wealth and comfort to come. He should have returned a week ago." "What do we do?" Priscilla asked, clutching her sister's arm. Before Penelope could answer, a sharp knock rattled the door. Both sisters froze, exchanging terrified glances. "Miss Norwood," a deep voice called through the wooden door. "Miss Penelope Norwood, I know you're in there. I'd like a word with you and your pretty sister." Penelope grabbed her father's shotgun from above the fireplace and motioned for Priscilla to move behind her. "We have nothing to say to you, Mr. Hollister," she called, her voice stronger than she felt. A laugh echoed from outside. "I think you do, miss. Your pa made a deal with us before he left for Tucson. Didn't he tell you?" "My father would never deal with outlaws," Penelope replied, her finger hovering near the trigger. "Well now, that's where you're wrong," Jacob Hollister's voice hardened. "Samuel Norwood promised us his claim in exchange for protection, and seeing as he ain't returned, well, we're here to collect what's ours, including his daughters." Priscilla gasped, and Penelope's blood ran cold. "That's a lie," she said firmly, though doubt crept into her mind. Their father had been desperate for funds before discovering the silver. Had he made promises he couldn't keep? "We'll give you till sundown to pack your things," Hollister continued. "My brothers and I will be back to escort you ladies to our camp. You'll be well cared for. Divided between us fair and square." The implications of his words weren't lost on the sisters. Penelope's grip tightened on the shotgun. "Leave our property, Mr. Hollister, or I'll have the sheriff on you." A chorus of laughter erupted from outside. "Sheriff Taylor's busy with a situation over in Charleston. Won't be back for days," Hollister replied. "Sundown, ladies. Don't make us come in after you." The sound of hoofbeats signaled their temporary departure, and Priscilla collapsed into a chair, her face pale. "They can't mean it, Penny," she whispered. "They wouldn't dare." But Penelope knew better. In the 3 years since they'd moved to Tombstone from Boston after their mother's death, she'd learned that the law in the Arizona Territory was often whatever the strongest man declared it to be. "We need to leave," she said firmly, already moving to gather their essentials. We'll go to the Tanner Ranch. Mr. Tanner will help us. That's 15 miles, Penny, Priscilla protested. We'll never make it on foot before sundown. Penelope paused, the gravity of their situation settling heavy on her shoulders. Then we'll have to find another way. As the sisters frantically packed what they could carry, neither noticed the lone rider approaching from the east, dust billowing behind him. Nathan Tucker pulled his horse to a stop on the ridge overlooking the Norwood homestead, observing the three riders who just departed. His keen blue eyes narrowed beneath the brim of his worn Stetson. Nathan had been trailing the Hollister gang for 2 months, ever since they'd robbed the stagecoach he was guarding outside of Flagstaff. 2 passengers had died in that robbery, including a young woman not much older than the Norwood sisters. As a former Texas Ranger turned bounty hunter, Nathan had made it his personal mission to bring the Hollister brothers to justice. He hadn't expected to find them in Tombstone, and he certainly hadn't expected to find them threatening 2 unprotected women. Nathan adjusted the Winchester rifle slung across his saddle and urged his horse forward. Whatever the Hollister gang wanted with the Norwood sisters, he wouldn't let them claim it without a fight. Inside the house, Penelope had just finished packing a small bag of essentials when a new knock at the door startled both sisters. "They're back already," Priscilla whispered, clutching her shawl around her shoulders. Penelope raised the shotgun. "Get behind me, Miss Norwood." A different voice called deeper with a slight Texas drawl. "My name is Nathan Tucker. I saw the Hollister gang leaving your property. I'd like to help if I can." The sisters exchanged suspicious glances. "How do we know you're not with them?" Penelope called. "I'm a bounty hunter, miss. Been trailing those men for 2 months. If you'll open the door, I'll show you my credentials." After a moment's hesitation, Penelope nodded to Priscilla, who unlatched the door but kept the chain in place. Through the narrow opening, they saw a tall man in his late 20s, with sun-bronzed skin and startlingly blue eyes. He tipped his hat respectfully and held up a folded paper. "Territorial authorization to apprehend the Hollister gang," he explained. "Signed by Judge Parker himself." Penelope examined the document through the gap, noting the official seal. "What do you want with us, Mr. Tucker?" "To help you, miss. Those men plan to return at sundown, and I doubt their intentions are honorable." His direct gaze met hers without wavering. "I count 3 of them and 1 of me, but with your help and a good defensive position, we might hold them off until I can get word to some friends of mine camped about 20 miles south." Priscilla looked to her sister with pleading eyes. Penelope hesitated only briefly before removing the chain and opening the door. "We're grateful for your assistance, Mr. Tucker," she said formally, though she kept the shotgun ready. "But you should know they're after our father's silver claim, and apparently us as well." Nathan stepped inside, removing his hat. "Silver, huh? That explains their interest. The Hollisters have been moving from robbery to claim jumping lately." He glanced around the modest home, assessing its defensive capabilities. "Where's your father, Tuckson?" Penelope replied. "He should have returned a week ago." A shadow crossed Nathan's face, but he quickly masked it. "I see. Well, Miss Norwood, first things first. We need to prepare this place to withstand an attack. Then, if we can, I'll send word to my associates. They're former Rangers like myself, tracking another branch of the Hollister gang." "You think we can hold them off?" Priscilla asked doubtfully. Nathan smiled slightly, his eyes warming. "I've held off worse odds, miss, and something tells me your sister here is quite capable." He nodded toward the shotgun Penelope still held confidently. "May I ask your names? I'm Penelope Norwood. This is my sister, Priscilla. A pleasure, despite the circumstances." Nathan moved to the window, scanning the surroundings. "Now, let's get to work. We've got about 6 hours until sundown." The next few hours passed in a flurry of activity as Nathan helped the sisters barricade the windows, create firing positions, and prepare for the coming confrontation. While they worked, Penelope found herself studying their unexpected ally. Unlike the rough men who frequented Tombstone's saloons, Nathan Tucker moved with a quiet confidence that spoke of discipline and capability. His hands, though calloused from years on the frontier, were surprisingly gentle as he showed Priscilla how to reload the spare revolver he'd given her. "Have you been a bounty hunter long, Mr. Tucker?" Penelope asked as they filled canteens from the well. "Call me Nathan, please," he replied. "And no, not long. I was with the Rangers for 7 years before that." "What made you leave?" A shadow crossed his face. "Lost my partner during an ambush. The men responsible were never brought to justice. The Rangers have their jurisdiction, and these outlaws know how to exploit the boundaries." He secured the cap on a canteen. "So I decided to work outside those boundaries. Follow men like the Hollisters wherever they go." "That sounds lonely," Priscilla remarked, joining them at the well. Nathan smiled faintly. "It can be, but it has its moments of purpose." He looked at both sisters, like now. By late afternoon, they had transformed the modest homestead into a defensible position. Nathan had sent the sisters' only horse carrying a message to his companions, hoping it would reach them by morning. Now, all they could do was wait. "You ladies should eat something," Nathan suggested as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. "Keep your strength up." Priscilla prepared a simple meal of beans and biscuits, while Penelope and Nathan finalized their defensive strategy. "I'll take the front," Nathan said, checking his Winchester for the 3rd time. "You cover the back door from the kitchen, Miss Norwood. Your sister can reload for both of us." Penelope nodded, though anxiety twisted her stomach. "Do you think they'll negotiate?" "Men like the Hollisters don't negotiate," Nathan replied honestly. "They take what they want. Our job is to convince them that what they want isn't worth dying for." The sun kissed the western mountains, painting the desert in hues of gold and crimson. Nathan positioned himself by the front window, his rifle ready. "They're coming," he said quietly as 3 riders appeared on the horizon. Penelope felt her heart hammering against her ribs. "Priscilla, stay low and out of sight." The younger sister nodded, her face pale but determined as she crouched in the kitchen. The Hollister brothers approached slowly, confidently, as if they had all the time in the world. Jacob, the leader, rode slightly ahead of his siblings, Ellie and Matthew. They reined in about 30 yards from the house. "Evening, Miss Norwood," Jacob called. "Time to fulfill your father's promise." Nathan stepped onto the porch, his Winchester cradled in his arms. "The ladies aren't going anywhere with you, Hollister." Jacob's expression hardened as he registered Nathan's presence. Well, if it ain't Nathan Tucker, still playing lawman, still hunting murderers," Nathan replied evenly. "You and your brothers are wanted in 3 territories. I'm giving you the chance to ride away. Don't take these women or this claim and we won't have trouble." Ellie Hollister, the youngest brother, laughed harshly. "1 man against 3, those ain't odds I'd worry about." "I've faced worse," Nathan said. "And I've sent for reinforcements. Rangers are on their way as we speak." Jacob's eyes narrowed. "You're bluffing, Tucker. Am I care to stake your life on it?" A tense silence fell over the scene as the Hollister brothers exchanged glances. Finally, Jacob spat on the ground. "We ain't leaving without what's ours," he declared. "Samuel Norwood made a deal. His claim and his pretty daughters for our protection. Seems he met with some unfortunate circumstances on his way back from Tucson." Penelope gasped from inside the house, the implications of his words hitting her like a physical blow. Her father wasn't coming back. Nathan's expression remained impassive. Last chance, Hollister. Ride away. Instead of answering, Jacob reached for his revolver. Nathan's rifle cracked and Jacob's hat flew off his head. Before the outlaw could recover, Nathan had worked the lever and aimed again. "That was a warning," he called. "Next one won't be." Chaos erupted as the Hollister brothers scattered, diving for cover behind rocks and scrub brush. Gunfire erupted, bullets splintering the wooden porch railing where Nathan had stood moments before. He'd already rolled back inside, taking position by the window. "Stay down," he called to the sisters as he returned fire with measured precision. Penelope crawled to the kitchen window, peering out to ensure none of the outlaws were circling around. The crack of gunfire was deafening in the small house, and Priscilla covered her ears, her eyes wide with fear. "They're trying to flank us," Nathan called. "Illy's moving around to the east side." Penelope adjusted her position, aiming the shotgun toward the eastern window. Minutes stretched into an hour of intermittent gunfire and tense silence as the outlaws probed their defenses. The light faded to dusk, making it harder to spot movement outside. "We need more light," Nathan muttered, reloading his rifle. "But lighting the lamps would just make us better targets." As if in answer to his words, Illy Hollister hurled a burning bottle against the side of the house. The glass shattered and flames licked up the dry wooden siding. "Fire!" Priscilla cried. "Keep your positions," Nathan ordered. "It's what they want to flush us out." Penelope grabbed a blanket and crawled toward the flames, beating at them desperately. A bullet splintered the wood inches from her hand. "Penelope, get back," Nathan shouted, using her first name in his urgency. She ignored him, continuing to smother the flames until they died down. Another shot rang out and she felt a searing pain across her upper arm. With a cry, she fell back. Nathan was at her side instantly, his face tight with concern. "You're hit." "It's just a graze," she insisted, though blood soaked through her sleeve. His blue eyes flashed with something fierce as he tore a strip from his own shirt to bind her wound. "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met," he muttered, but there was admiration in his voice. "Behind you," Priscilla screamed. Nathan whirled, drawing his Colt revolver in one fluid motion as Matthew Hollister appeared in the back doorway. Two shots echoed almost simultaneously. Matthew stumbled backward, clutching his chest while Nathan grunted, a red stain blooming on his left shoulder. "Nathan!" Penelope cried as he slumped against the wall. "I'm all right," he insisted through gritted teeth. "Check if he's down." Penelope crawled to the door and peered out. Matthew Hollister lay motionless in the dirt. "He's not moving." "One down," Nathan said grimly, pressing his hand against his wound. "Two to go." Priscilla hurried to help bandage Nathan's shoulder while Penelope took up his position by the front window. Outside, Jacob's voice rose in anguish when he spotted his fallen brother. "You're dead, Tucker." He roared. "You and those women both." The assault intensified, bullets riddling the small house from multiple angles. Glass shattered, and wood splintered as the Hollister brothers poured their rage into the attack. Nathan, despite his injury, moved from window to window, returning fire when he had a clear shot. "We can't hold out much longer," Penelope said, her voice steady despite the fear clutching at her heart. "They'll rush us when they realize you're wounded." Nathan checked his ammunition with a grim expression. "My friends should be here by morning if they got my message. We just need to survive the night." "And if they didn't get your message?" Priscilla asked softly. Nathan's eyes met Penelope's across the darkened room. "Then we fight until we can't anymore." The gunfire outside suddenly ceased, leaving an eerie silence. Nathan tensed, moving cautiously to the window. "What are they doing?" Penelope whispered. "Nothing good," he replied, scanning the darkness. "They're planning something." The answer came moments later as the smell of smoke filled the house once more. This time, it wasn't just one bottle but several, hurled from different directions. Flames climbed up the exterior walls, and smoke began to seep through the cracks. "They're burning us out," Nathan said, his voice grim. "We need to move, now." "Where can we go?" Priscilla asked, coughing as smoke filled the room. "The root cellar," Penelope decided quickly. "Behind the kitchen, we can access it through the trapdoor," Nathan nodded. "Good thinking. Grab only what's essential. Water, ammunition, your father's papers if you have them." As the sisters gathered their necessities, Nathan covered their retreat, firing occasionally to keep the Hollisters at bay. The smoke grew thicker, and flames began to lick at the window frames. Penelope led the way to the trapdoor hidden beneath a rug in the kitchen, pulling it open to reveal a small earthen cellar where her father had stored preserves and root vegetables. "Hurry," she urged, helping Priscilla down the ladder. Nathan backed toward them, still facing the main room where flames now consumed the front wall. "Go," he said to Penelope. "I'll be right behind you." She hesitated, unwilling to leave him. "Nathan, go," he insisted, his eyes intense in the firelight. "I promise I'm coming." Reluctantly, Penelope climbed down the ladder. The root cellar was cool and dark, a stark contrast to the inferno above. Priscilla huddled in a corner, clutching their father's lockbox containing his claim papers. Seconds later, Nathan descended, pulling the trapdoor closed above them. "They'll think we burned with the house," he explained, his voice hoarse from smoke. "It might give us an advantage." He lit a small lantern, illuminating the cramped space. The cellar was no more than 8 feet square, its walls packed earth supported by wooden beams. Shelves of preserves lined one wall, and a narrow air shaft in the ceiling provided ventilation. "Will we be safe down here?" Priscilla asked, her voice small. "The fire shouldn't reach us," Nathan assured her, though his expression remained concerned. "But we'll need to be quiet. They'll search the ruins once the flames die down." Penelope uncapped a canteen and offered it to Nathan. "Your shoulder, let me look at it properly." He started to protest, but relented when she fixed him with a determined glare. As she carefully removed the makeshift bandage, she could feel Priscilla watching them with knowing eyes. "You're lucky," Penelope said, examining the wound in the lantern's dim light. "The bullet went through clean. No major damage that I can see." "Not my first gunshot," Nathan replied with a hint of wry humor. "Though usually I manage to avoid getting shot altogether." "Usually you're not protecting 2 women in a wooden house," she countered, cleaning the wound with water and a clean cloth from their supplies. He winced slightly but remained still under her ministrations. No regrets there. Their eyes met in the lantern light, and something unspoken passed between them. Penelope felt her cheeks warm, and she quickly returned her attention to bandaging his shoulder. Above them, they could hear the crackle of flames and occasional shouts from the Hollister brothers. The minutes stretched into hours as they sat in tense silence, listening to their home burn to the ground. Priscilla eventually dozed off, exhaustion claiming her despite the danger. "You should rest too," Nathan whispered to Penelope. "I'll keep watch." She shook her head. "I couldn't sleep even if I tried." He studied her face in the soft glow of the lantern. "You're remarkably calm for someone who just lost her home." "It was never really home," she admitted quietly, careful not to wake her sister. "Not like Boston was. Father brought us here after Mother died, chasing silver dreams. He promised we'd go back to civilization once he struck it rich. And now," Penelope's throat tightened. "Now I think he might have been lying about that too, if what Jacob Hollister said is true." Nathan reached out, hesitating briefly before covering her hand with his. "We don't know that for certain. Hollister could have been lying to rattle us." "But you don't think so?" she observed, reading his expression. He sighed. No, I don't. The Hollisters have been leaving bodies in their wake for months, if your father crossed paths with them. He didn't need to finish the thought. Penelope felt tears sting her eyes, but she blinked them away. There would be time for grief later if they survived. Thank you, she said suddenly. For being here, we would have been. She couldn't bring herself to complete the sentence. Nathan squeezed her hand gently. I'm right where I need to be, Penelope. The way he said her name, soft and warm, sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. In the midst of danger and loss, she found herself noticing the strength in his hands, the intelligence in his eyes, the quiet confidence he exuded even wounded and trapped. They sat in companionable silence as the sounds of destruction continued above. Eventually, even those sounds faded, replaced by an ominous quiet that suggested the fire had burned itself out. They'll be searching soon, Nathan whispered, extinguishing the lantern. Not a sound. In the pitch darkness, Penelope felt his presence beside her like a tangible thing, solid and reassuring. She found herself leaning slightly toward him, drawing strength from his proximity. When his arms slipped around her shoulders, she didn't pull away. They remained thus for what felt like hours, listening intently for any sign of the Hollisters. Occasionally, they heard footsteps above and muffled voices as the outlaws searched the ruins. Once, boots thumped directly overhead, sending dust filtering down through the air shaft. Penelope held her breath, her heart pounding so loudly she feared it might give them away. Nathan's arm tightened around her protectively, his breath warm against her ear as he whispered, "They'll give up soon. Dawn's approaching." True to his prediction, the sounds of searching eventually ceased. A rooster crowed somewhere in the distance, announcing the arrival of morning. "Should we risk it?" Penelope whispered. Nathan considered. "Let me go first. I'll signal if it's clear." Reluctantly, she moved away from him as he carefully opened the trapdoor. Cool morning air and the smell of ash filtered into the cellar. Nathan climbed out silently, his movements cautious despite his injury. After a few tense minutes, his face appeared in the opening. "They're gone," he reported, "but they didn't go far. I can see their camp about a half-mile west." Penelope gently woke Priscilla, and they emerged from their underground sanctuary to survey the devastation in the gray light of dawn. The house was completely destroyed, nothing but smoldering timbers and ash remaining. Penelope felt a pang of loss as she realized all their possessions, the family Bible, her mother's jewelry, Priscilla's books, were gone forever. "What now?" Priscilla asked, her voice small as she clutched the lockbox to her chest. Nathan scanned the horizon, his expression grim. "We need to move. The Hollisters think we're dead, which gives us an advantage, but it won't last long." He pointed east. "There's a line shack about 3 miles that way, used by the Circle T Ranch for their cowhands. We can take shelter there while we wait for my friends." "If they're coming," Penelope said. "They're coming," Nathan assured her with confidence. "Daniel Reeves is the most reliable man I know. If that horse found them, they'll be riding hard toward us right now." They gathered what meager supplies remained and began walking eastward, keeping to the low ground and ravines to avoid being spotted. The morning sun beat down mercilessly as they trudged through the desert terrain. Nathan's wound clearly pained him, though he refused to complain or slow their pace. Priscilla, unused to such exertion, began to falter after the first mile. Without a word, Nathan relieved her of the lockbox she carried, adding it to his own burden despite his injury. The gesture wasn't lost on Penelope, whose estimation of the bounty hunter rose even higher. By mid-morning they reached the line shack, a crude but solid structure built of logs and stone. It contained a single room with a small fireplace, a rough-hewn table, and 2 narrow bunks. Basic supplies lined shelves along one wall: beans, coffee, hardtack, and ammunition. "It's not much," Nathan said as they entered, "but it'll keep us alive." "It's perfect," Penelope assured him, helping Priscilla to one of the bunks. Her sister's face was flushed with exhaustion, and Penelope worried she might be developing a fever from the stress and exertion. While Priscilla rested, Penelope and Nathan took stock of their situation. They had limited ammunition, enough food for perhaps 3 days if they were careful, and a defensible position, though not one that could withstand a determined assault for long. "Your friends," Penelope began hesitantly. "How many are there?" "3," Nathan replied as he checked the perimeter through a small window. "Daniel Reeves, Sam Holcomb, and Will Garrett, all former Rangers, all good men in a fight, and all likely to be riding into an ambush if the Hollisters spot them coming," she observed. Nathan's expression was grim. "That's my concern as well. The Hollisters may think we burned, but they'll be watching the approaches to town, especially if they spot riders coming from the south. Then we need to warn them somehow." "How? We have no horse, and showing ourselves would alert the Hollisters that we survived." Penelope considered the problem, her practical mind working through possibilities. "What about a signal fire?" "Your friends would recognize it, but the Hollisters might think it's just cowhands or prospectors." Nathan's eyes lit up. "That might work. There's a hill about a half-mile east with good visibility, if we can light a controlled fire and use a blanket to send a message." "Morse code," Penelope supplied. "I learned it in school." His admiration was evident. "Is there anything you can't do, Miss Norwood?" She felt her cheeks warm under his gaze. "Many things, Mr. Tucker, but I'm trying to learn." They spent the next hour planning their strategy. Nathan would stay with Priscilla to defend the line shack if needed, while Penelope would climb the hill to signal Nathan's approaching friends. They assembled what they would need: a blanket from the shack, matches, and kindling for a small fire. "Be careful," Nathan said as Penelope prepared to leave. His hand lingered on her arm, his touch sending an unexpected warmth through her despite the danger of their situation. "If you see any sign of the Hollisters, don't light the fire. Just come back immediately." "I will," she promised, suddenly reluctant to leave his side. "Take care of Priscilla." "With my life," he assured her. The sincerity in his eyes made her breath catch. Impulsively, she rose on her tiptoes and pressed a quick kiss to his cheek. "For luck," she whispered, then turned and slipped out the door before he could respond. The hill was farther than it appeared, and the climb more strenuous than Penelope had anticipated. The sun beat down mercilessly, and her wounded arm throbbed with each step. Still, she pressed on, driven by the knowledge that their lives depended on warning Nathan's friends. From the hilltop, she had a clear view of the surrounding terrain. The remains of their homestead smoldered in the distance, and beyond it she could make out the Hollister brothers' camp. They had positioned themselves strategically, with clear sightlines to all approaches from the south, exactly where Nathan's friends would be coming from. Penelope gathered rocks to create a fire pit, then carefully arranged her kindling. She waited, watching the southern horizon for any sign of riders. Hours passed, and the sun began its westward descent. Her water was running low, and worry gnawed at her. What if Nathan's friends weren't coming after all? Just as she was considering returning to the line shack, she spotted them 4 riders approaching from the south, moving at a steady pace. Even at this distance, she could tell they were traveling openly, unaware of the danger that awaited them. Quickly, Penelope lit her fire. Once it caught, she used the blanket to send her message: "Danger. Hollister ambush. Circle east." She repeated the message several times, praying that someone in the group would understand. To her relief, the riders stopped. After a brief consultation, they veered eastward, taking a route that would bring them around the Hollisters' position. Penelope smothered her fire and prepared to descend. As she gathered her things, movement caught her eye. A lone rider was approaching the hill from the west, coming from the direction of the Hollister camp. Her heart hammering, Penelope flattened herself against the ground. The rider circled the base of the hill, clearly investigating the smoke from her signal fire. She recognized him even from a distance, Eli Hollister, the younger brother. For nearly an hour, she remained motionless as Eli prowled around the hill, occasionally dismounting to examine the ground for tracks. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the landscape. If she didn't return to the line shack soon, Nathan would worry, possibly even come looking for her, a risk they couldn't afford. Finally, Eli mounted his horse and rode back toward his camp. Penelope waited until he was out of sight before beginning her descent down the opposite side of the hill. She moved carefully, using the growing darkness for cover. The journey back took twice as long as she was forced to take a circuitous route to avoid detection. Night had fallen completely by the time she approached the line shack, her legs trembling with exhaustion. A soft whistle from the darkness nearly stopped her heart until she recognized Nathan's signal. He emerged from the shadows, rifle ready, his face tight with worry. "I was about to come looking for you," he said, ushering her inside. "Eli Hollister was investigating my signal fire," she explained breathlessly. "I had to wait him out." "Did your message get through?" Penelope nodded, accepting the canteen he offered. "They changed course, heading east. If they maintain their pace, they should reach us by morning." Relief washed over Nathan's face. "Well done." Inside the shack, Priscilla was awake, her fever broken. She embraced her sister tightly. "I was so worried." "We all were," Nathan said, his eyes lingering on Penelope's face. "But your sister is as capable as she is brave." They shared a meager meal of beans and hardtack, then discussed their plans for the morning. If Nathan's friends arrived as expected, they would have the numbers to confront the Hollister brothers. If not, they would need to consider a more desperate escape plan. "Either way," Nathan said firmly, "I'm not letting those men anywhere near either of you." His protective declaration warmed Penelope in ways she hadn't expected. In the short time they'd known each other, Nathan Tucker had proven himself to be everything her father was not: reliable, honorable, and true to his word. As night deepened, they took turns keeping watch. During her shift, Penelope found herself studying Nathan as he slept, his features softer in repose though still marked by the hard life he'd led. She wondered what had brought him to this path, hunting dangerous men across the frontier, risking his life for justice rather than reward. When it came time to wake him for his watch, she hesitated, her hand hovering above his shoulder. In sleep, the weight he carried seemed momentarily lifted, and she was reluctant to burden him again. But as if sensing her presence, his eyes opened, immediately alert. "All quiet?" he asked, his voice husky from sleep. "Yes," she replied softly. "No sign of the Hollisters." He sat up, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at his wounded shoulder. "You should rest. Tomorrow will be challenging one way or another." Penelope settled onto the vacated bunk, but sleep eluded her. "Nathan," she said after a while, "what will happen after this is over? To Priscilla and me," he considered her question carefully. "That depends on what you want to happen. Your father's claim is still valid, assuming you have the proper papers. You could sell it, return to Boston perhaps." The thought should have been comforting, returning to civilization, to the life they'd known before their father's silver dreams had brought them to this harsh land. Yet Penelope found herself strangely reluctant to embrace the idea. "And what about you?" she asked. "Will you continue hunting bounties?" Nathan was silent for a long moment. I've been thinking about that. The Hollisters are part of a larger network of outlaws operating across the territories. Taking them down won't end the threat, he sighed. But a man can't live his life seeking vengeance forever. What would you do instead? I've saved some money, he said. Enough to buy a small ranch, perhaps, somewhere peaceful. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Though I'm not sure I remember what peace feels like anymore. I think, Penelope said softly, that peace isn't a place, it's a feeling. A sense that you're exactly where you're meant to be with the people you're meant to be with. Their eyes met across the darkened room, and something unspoken passed between them, a connection that transcended the brief time they'd known each other. In Nathan's gaze, Penelope saw possibilities she had never dared to imagine. A life built on shared strength rather than dependence, partnership rather than patriarchy, love rather than obligation. Dawn broke with a symphony of birdsong, the desert awakening to another scorching day. Nathan, who had taken the last watch, roused the sisters as first light painted the eastern sky. "Riders approaching from the southeast," he reported. "4 of them. I believe it's my friends." Relief washed over Penelope. "They got my message." "And followed it perfectly," Nathan confirmed with a hint of pride. "They'll be here within the hour." They hurriedly prepared for the arrival, gathering their meager belongings and checking their weapons. Priscilla, though still weak, insisted on helping. The lockbox containing their father's claim papers remained secured at her side. "What happens when your friends arrive?" she asked. "Will we confront the Hollisters?" Nathan nodded grimly. "We'll have the advantage of numbers and surprise, but the Hollisters won't surrender easily. They're killers, and they know the noose awaits them if they're captured." "Then perhaps there's another way," Penelope suggested. "One that doesn't risk more bloodshed." Both Nathan and Priscilla looked at her expectantly. "The claim," she explained, "it's what they want. Maybe we can use it as bait to draw them into a trap." Nathan's expression shifted from surprise to admiration. "That's clever. If we can separate them, take them one by one." They spent the next half-hour refining the plan, speaking in hushed tones as they watched the horizon for signs of Nathan's approaching friends. When the riders finally appeared, Nathan stepped outside to signal them. The 4 men who dismounted before the line shack were every bit the hardened frontiersmen Penelope had imagined, weathered, watchful, and well-armed. Nathan greeted them with warm handshakes and brief introductions. "Daniel Reeves," he said, indicating a tall man with graying temples and shrewd eyes. "Best tracker in 3 territories." Reeves tipped his hat to the sisters. "Ladies." "Sam Holcomb and Will Garrett," Nathan continued, gesturing to 2 younger men who nodded respectfully. The 4th man, broad-shouldered with a magnificent mustache, stepped forward. "Marshal James Harker, Arizona Territory," he introduced himself. "I was riding with these gentlemen when your message found them. The Hollister Gang is wanted for murder, robbery, and a litany of other crimes." Penelope felt a surge of hope at the marshal's presence. Perhaps this could be resolved through proper legal channels after all. Inside the shack, Nathan explained their situation and Penelope's plan to use the claim as bait. Marshal Harker listened intently, his expression thoughtful. "It could work," he agreed finally, "but it's risky. If anything goes wrong, the Hollisters won't hesitate to kill anyone in their way." "We're already at risk," Penelope pointed out. "At least this way we choose the battlefield." The marshal studied her with newfound respect. "You're a remarkable woman, Miss Norwood." "She is," Nathan agreed, his voice soft but firm. The look he gave her sent warmth spreading through Penelope's chest. They spent the next hour finalizing their strategy. Penelope would approach the Hollister camp under a flag of truce. offering to trade the claim papers for their safety. The Marshal and Nathan's friends would position themselves around the area, ready to move in when the Hollisters revealed themselves. "I don't like sending you in alone," Nathan said privately to Penelope as the others prepared their weapons. "It's too dangerous." "They won't harm me if they think I have what they want," she replied with more confidence than she felt. "And I won't be alone. You'll all be watching." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "When this is over, I'd like to talk about what comes next for both of us." Her heart quickened. "I'd like that too." The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch, but before either could say more, Marshal Harker called them over to review the final details of the plan. By mid-morning, everything was in place. Penelope carried her father's lockbox, now emptied of its actual contents, and a white handkerchief tied to a stick. Nathan and the others had taken their positions, hidden but with clear sightlines to the Hollister camp. "Be careful," Priscilla whispered, embracing her sister before she left. She would remain at the line shack with Sam Holcomb for protection. "I will," Penelope promised. "This will all be over soon." The walk to the Hollister camp seemed both endless and all too short. Penelope's heart hammered against her ribs, but her steps remained steady. She focused on Nathan's face, on the future they might build together if they survived this day. The Hollister brothers spotted her when she was about 100 yards from their camp. She saw them reaching for weapons before noticing her white flag. "That's far enough." Jacob Hollister called, rifle aimed at her chest. "What do you want?" Penelope held up the lockbox. "I have a proposition, Mr. Hollister. My father's claimed papers in exchange for my sister's safety and mine." Confusion, then suspicion crossed Jacob's face. "You're supposed to be dead." "Yet here I stand," she replied calmly. "The fire destroyed our home, but not us. Now I'm offering you what you wanted all along: legal ownership of the silver claim." Jacob exchanged glances with his remaining brother, Illy. "Why would you do that?" "Because I value our lives more than silver," Penelope said simply. "My sister and I wish to return east. The claim means nothing to us now." She could see the greed warring with suspicion in Jacob's eyes. "Show me the papers," he demanded. "From here." Penelope shook her head. "I'm not a fool, Mr. Hollister. We make the exchange properly or not at all." For a tense moment she thought he might shoot her where she stood, then he lowered his rifle slightly. "Come forward." Slowly, he ordered. "Illy, check her for weapons." Penelope approached, her heart in her throat. She knew Nathan and the others were watching, ready to intervene, but the next few moments would be the most dangerous. Illy Hollister roughly searched her, his hands lingering inappropriately until she jerked away. "She's clean," he reported with a leer that made her skin crawl. Jacob took the lockbox, examining it suspiciously before attempting to open it. "It's locked." "Of course it is," Penelope replied. "The key is with my sister. Insurance that you'll let me return to her safely after you've verified the papers are genuine." A cunning expression crossed Jacob's face. "Or we could just force the box open and take what we want." "You could," she agreed. "But damaging the papers might invalidate them, and then you'd have nothing but another murder on your hands." The outlaw studied her for a long moment, his eyes cold and calculating. Finally, he nodded. "Fine. We'll all go to your sister, show us where she is." This wasn't part of the plan. Penelope's mind raced, searching for a way to maintain control of the situation. "That wasn't our agreement." "I bring the key back here." "Agreement's changed," Jacob snarled, grabbing her arm. "Now move, or I'll shoot you where you stand and find your sister myself." Before Penelope could respond, a shot rang out. Jacob cried out as the lockbox exploded in his hands, splinters of wood embedding in his flesh. Another shot followed, and Illy Hollister dropped to his knees, clutching his shoulder. "Let her go, Hollister." Nathan's voice rang out as he emerged from behind a boulder, rifle aimed squarely at Jacob. "It's over." Marshal Harker and Daniel Reeves appeared from different directions, weapons trained on the outlaws. "Jacob and Ellie Hollister," the marshal called, "you're under arrest for murder, robbery, and attempted kidnapping." Jacob, bleeding but defiant, reached for his sidearm. Nathan's rifle cracked again and the outlaw fell backward, a red stain spreading across his chest. Ellie, seeing his brother fall, raised his hands in surrender. "Don't shoot. I give up." Within minutes, the remaining Hollister was disarmed and in custody. Nathan rushed to Penelope's side, his eyes scanning her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, hands gentle as they checked her arms, her face. "I'm fine," she assured him, though she trembled with the aftermath of fear and relief. "Truly." The intensity in his gaze nearly undid her. Before she could speak, he pulled her into his arms, holding her as if he might never let go. "Don't ever do something that reckless again," he murmured against her hair. Penelope smiled against his chest. "I thought you admired my capability and bravery." "I admire your continued existence more," he replied with feeling, drawing back just enough to look into her eyes. Around them, Marshal Harker and the others secured Ellie Hollister and examined Jacob's body. The danger had passed, yet Penelope felt no desire to move from the circle of Nathan's arms. "You said we would talk about what comes next," she reminded him softly. Nathan's expression grew serious. "I did, and I meant it." He took a deep breath. "Penelope, I know we've only known each other for days, but in that time, you've shown more courage, intelligence, and heart than most people do in a lifetime. I don't want to say goodbye when this is over." Hope blossomed in her chest. "What are you saying, Nathan?" "I'm saying that I believe some people are meant to find each other, even in the most unlikely circumstances." His hands tightened gently on her arms. "I'm saying that I'd like to court you properly, if you'll allow it, to see if what I already feel growing between us might become something lasting." Penelope felt tears prick her eyes, but they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. "I'd like that very much," she whispered. The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise after the longest night. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Nathan lowered his head and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with a hunger that spoke of days of tension and fear transmuted into something beautiful. When they finally parted, breathless and flushed, Marshal Harker cleared his throat pointedly from a few yards away. "If you two are finished, we should get back to the line shack before Miss Priscilla worries herself sick." Nathan grinned, unembarrassed. "Yes, sir. Right away, sir." The return to the line shack was a journey of hope rather than fear. Nathan kept Penelope's hand in his as they walked, as if unwilling to break their connection even briefly. When they arrived, Priscilla burst through the door, throwing herself into her sister's arms. "You're safe," she cried, tears streaming down her cheeks, "when we heard the gunshots." "It's over," Penelope soothed her. "The Hollisters can't hurt us anymore." Over the next hours, as Ellie Hollister was secured for transport to Tucson to stand trial, the sisters discussed their future with Nathan and Marshal Harker. Their father's claim was still valid, and with Jacob Hollister's dying confession, they learned the truth of their father's fate, ambushed and killed on his return journey from Tucson. "You could sell the claim," the marshal suggested. "It would give you funds to return east if that's your wish." Priscilla looked to her sister. "Is it, Penny? Do you want to go back to Boston?" Penelope's eyes found Nathan's across the small room. "I'm not sure Boston is home anymore," she said softly. That evening, as they prepared to ride to Tombstone with their escort of lawmen, Nathan drew Penelope aside. The setting sun painted the desert in hues of gold and crimson, a beauty she was only now beginning to truly see. "I meant what I said earlier," he told her, his voice low and earnest. "I want to court you, Penelope Norwood, to build something real with you if you'll have me." "And your bounty hunting?" she asked. "Your quest for vengeance?" Nathan shook his head. "Marshal Harker offered me a deputy position in Tucson. It would be steady work, safer work. A chance to uphold the law without constantly chasing it across the territories." He took her hands in his. "A chance to build a life that includes more than just duty and vengeance." Penelope's heart swelled with possibility. "I think I'd like to see Tucson," she said, a smile playing at her lips. "Priscilla and I both." "It's a growing city," he replied, his thumbs tracing gentle circles on her palms. "Civilized enough for two Boston ladies, but still with enough frontier spirit to be interesting. And close enough to our father's claim that we could develop it properly," she added. "With the right partner, of course." The look he gave her was filled with such tenderness that it nearly took her breath away. "Penelope Norwood, I believe you may be the most remarkable woman in all the territories. And you, Nathan Tucker, are certainly the most honorable man I've ever known." This time when he kissed her, it was a promise of protection, partnership, and a future woven from the threads of their shared courage. 3 months later, Nathan Tucker stood beside Marshal Harker on the boardwalk outside the Tucson courthouse, watching as Illy Hollister was led away to begin his life sentence. "Justice served," the marshal commented, satisfaction evident in his voice. "Thanks in no small part to your testimony and Miss Norwood's." Nathan nodded, his thoughts already turning to the evening ahead. "Speaking of the Norwood sisters, I should get going. I promised Penelope I'd escort her to the new opera house tonight." Harker chuckled. "You've come a long way from tracking outlaws through the desert, Tucker. Opera houses and calling cards, next thing you know, you'll be wearing those Eastern suits with the fancy vests." "Only if Penelope insists," Nathan replied with a grin. "And even then, I might have to draw the line somewhere." In truth, the past 3 months had brought changes Nathan could never have imagined when he first set out to hunt the Hollister Gang. After escorting the Norwood sisters to Tucson, he had accepted the deputy marshal position, finding unexpected satisfaction in upholding the law within a community, rather than pursuing outlaws across the frontier. Penelope and Priscilla had used their father's claim to secure a modest but comfortable home in Tucson. With Nathan's guidance, they had hired a reputable mining engineer to develop the claim, which was already yielding enough silver to ensure their financial security. Priscilla, flourishing in Tucson's social circles, had recently begun corresponding with a young lawyer who showed promising signs of serious interest. And Penelope. Nathan's heart quickened at the thought of her. Their courtship had progressed with a natural ease that belied the dramatic circumstances of their first meeting. In her, he had found not just a partner but a confidante, someone who understood the shadows of his past without being afraid of them. The small velvet box in his pocket seemed to burn with possibility as he made his way to the Norwood home. Tonight, if his courage held, he would ask Penelope to be his wife. She was waiting for him on the porch, a vision in blue silk that complemented her eyes. Her smile when she saw him approach made every hardship he'd ever endured worthwhile. "Deputy Tucker," she greeted him formally, though her eyes danced with private amusement. "How handsome you look this evening." "Miss Norwood," he returned with a tip of his hat and a smile. "You outshine the stars themselves." Priscilla appeared in the doorway, her expression knowing. "You two should go before you miss the overture. And Nathan, do try to bring my sister home at a reasonable hour." "I make no promises," he replied with a wink that made Penelope blush. The new Tucson Opera House, was modest compared to its eastern counterparts, but it represented the territory's growing aspirations toward culture and refinement. As they settled into their seats, Nathan found himself more captivated by Penelope's rapt expression than by the performance itself. During the intermission, he suggested they step outside for some air. The desert night was cool and clear, stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky. In a small garden beside the opera house, away from curious eyes, Nathan took both of Penelope's hands in his. "I had a speech prepared," he began, his voice husky with emotion. "Something eloquent about destiny and courage and finding light in the darkness." Penelope's eyes shimmered in the moonlight. "And now all I can think to say is that I love you, Penelope Norwood. I love your courage and your intelligence, your gentleness and your strength. I want to build a life with you to face whatever comes next together." He reached into his pocket and withdrew the small velvet box, opening it to reveal a modest but elegant diamond ring. "Will you marry me?" Tears spilled onto Penelope's cheeks as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Nathan Tucker, I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms for a kiss that sealed their promise, Nathan marveled at how the path of vengeance had led him, unexpectedly, to love. The quest that had driven him for so long had brought him not to an outlaw's grave but to this moment, this woman, this future bright with possibility. 6 months later, on a perfect autumn day, Nathan Tucker and Penelope Norwood were married in Tuckson's newly completed church. Priscilla, radiant as maid of honor, stood beside her sister as they exchanged vows before family and friends. Marshall Harker and Nathan's former ranger companions were there, along with what seemed like half of Tuckson's population. "I, Nathan, take you, Penelope, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he said, his voice steady and sure. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part." When Penelope repeated the vows, her eyes never leaving his, Nathan felt a peace he had not known since before his partner's death. This was where he belonged, not pursuing ghosts across the frontier, but building a future with the extraordinary woman before him. After the ceremony, as they greeted well-wishers at the reception held in the town's grandest hotel, Priscilla embraced them both. "Father would never have imagined this," she said with a mixture of joy and wistfulness. His practical daughter married to a lawman, his silver claim producing steady returns rather than instant riches. "You think he would have approved?" Penelope asked, though her happiness seemed untouchable by doubt. Priscilla squeezed her hand. "I think he would have been proud of the women we've become, even if it wasn't the path he envisioned." Nathan watched the exchange with a full heart. Though Samuel Norwood's dreams had ultimately led to his demise, they had also brought his daughters west, placing Penelope in Nathan's path at precisely the moment he needed to find something worth living for beyond vengeance. Later, as they danced their first waltz as husband and wife, Nathan pulled Penelope close. "No regrets," he murmured. She smiled up at him, her eyes luminous with happiness. "Only that we didn't meet sooner." "I think we met exactly when we were meant to," he replied, thinking of how differently things might have turned out if he hadn't spotted the Hollister Gang that fateful day. Some paths are meant to cross, no matter how unlikely it seems. As the music swelled around them, Nathan thought of the journey that had brought them to this moment, from a burning homestead, to a desert hilltop, to this dance floor where they began their life together. They had faced danger and loss, yet found in each other the strength to build something beautiful from the ashes. "I love you, Mrs. Tucker," he whispered against her hair. "And I love you, Deputy Tucker," she returned, her smile brighter than any silver vein her father had ever sought. 5 years later, Nathan sat on the porch of their ranch house outside Tucson, watching as Penelope chased their 3-year-old son, Samuel, across the yard. Their daughter, Margaret, barely a year old, dozed in his arms, her small head resting trustingly against his chest. The silver mine continued to produce moderate yields, providing security without the boom and bust cycle that characterized so many frontier fortunes. Nathan had risen to the rank of Chief Deputy Marshal, respected throughout the territory for his fairness and integrity. Penelope, not content to be merely a lawman's wife, had established a small school for the children of miners and ranchers who lived too far from town for regular education. Priscilla, now married to the lawyer she had begun corresponding with after their move to Tucson, visited often with her own growing family. Their home was filled with laughter, learning, and love, everything Nathan had once believed lost to him forever. As the sun began to set, painting the desert in hues of crimson and gold, Penelope joined him on the porch, lifting a sleepy Samuel into her lap. Her face, though a few years older, was more beautiful to Nathan than ever, etched with the contentment of a life well lived. "What are you thinking about so seriously?" she asked, noticing his contemplative expression. Nathan smiled, reaching out to take her hand. "About how differently our lives might have turned out if the Hollister Gang hadn't set their sights on two sisters from Boston, or if a certain bounty hunter hadn't happened to be tracking them." Penelope's fingers entwined with his. "You ever miss it? The freedom of the trail, the excitement of the hunt." He shook his head without hesitation. "Not for a moment. Everything I could ever want is right here." And it was true. The restlessness that had driven him for so many years had been replaced by a profound peace. The path of vengeance had led, unexpectedly, to redemption, not through the barrel of a gun, but through the love of a remarkable woman and the family they had built together. As twilight deepened into night, they sat together on the porch, their children sleeping peacefully in their arms, bearing witness to the truth that even in the wildest of frontiers, love could take root and flourish. Their story, which had begun in fire and desperation, had blossomed into something enduring and beautiful, a testament to the courage it takes not just to survive, but to truly live. And as the stars emerged, bright against the velvet sky, Nathan Tucker held his family close, grateful beyond words for the unlikely journey that had brought them home.